The sun burned hot over the dry land, but Thaddius Bell didn't move. He stood on the edge of his wooden porch, hands gripping the railing, eyes locked on the strange and shocking sight before him. After 3 years of silence, 3 years of living alone in the middle of nowhere, he wasn't sure if this was real or a cruel trick from the past he tried. It's so hard to forget. 6 young women were kneeling in the dirt outside his ranch fence. They were crying, dusty, and shaking. Their dresses were torn, their faces thin and pale. One of them, a girl with long auburn hair, looked up first. Her green eyes were tired, but burning with desperation. Thaddius felt something cold grip his chest. He hadn't spoken to another human being in a long time. He had locked himself away on purpose. No visitors, no voices. Just the land, the wind, and the pain he kept buried deep. But now, 6 broken strangers were begging for help. And he knew deep in his gut that if he let them in, everything would. Changed the girl with the auburn hair tried to speak. At first, her dry lips barely made a sound. Then she whispered something that cut through the hot air like a blade. "Please, mister, we've got nowhere else to go. They're hunting us." Thaddius didn't answer right away. Stared at her like a man trapped between 2 lives. She looked no older than 20, maybe less. The youngest girl beside her couldn't be more than 16. He saw cuts on their arms, bruises on their necks, and blood stains on their clothes. One girl leaned against the other like she might fall over at any second. They were half dead from fear, exhaustion, and thirst. And still, they had come to him. Thaddius's voice was rough and rusty when he finally spoke. "You need to leave," he said. "Can't help you." He wanted to turn around, to go back, inside, and shut the door. That's what he would have done a year ago, maybe even yesterday. But today, something was different. Something about the way the girl was swaying on her feet, something about the quiet strength in her eyes. "My name's Clara," the girl said. "They took our wagon 3 days ago, killed our guide, said if they caught us again, they'd do worse. We've been running ever since." Thaddius blinked slowly. Her words hit him hard. His heart started to beat faster. "Who's they?" Clara opened her mouth, but before she could answer, her knees buckled. She fell to the dirt. Blood began soaking through her dress, right where her hand pressed to her side. The other girls rushed to help her, but they were barely strong enough to stand themselves. Thaddius took a step forward without thinking, then another. The silence around the ranch was suddenly broken by a sound he hadn't heard in years. Horses. He turned his head toward the distant ridge. A dust cloud rose from the desert. "Riders. Coming fast. They found us," Clara whispered, grabbing his arm with shaky fingers. "Please, if you turn us away, we're dead." Thaddius looked back at the cabin, the one safe place he had left in the world. Then he looked at the 6 girls, broken and afraid. He could walk away. He could pretend they were never here. That would be easy. But what if they died right there in the dirt? Could he live with that? "No," he muttered to himself. "Not again." He stepped off the porch and picked up the youngest girl. She was burning with fever. She didn't weigh more than a sack of grain. The others followed, limping, holding each other, half-capsing into his home. For 3 years that cabin had been his world. Now it was filled with strangers. And still he didn't stop them. Once inside, Clara fell to the floor, barely conscious. Thaddius locked the door and began blocking the windows. He grabbed his old rifle. It felt strange in his hands, heavy with old memories. "Who's chasing you?" he asked, staring out the window as the riders got closer. Clara took a deep breath, her voice weak. "Slavers," she said. "We were sold by a man who promised us jobs. Said we'd be seamstresses, teachers. But he lied. He'd sold us like animals." Thaddius felt his stomach twist. He thought he'd left the evil of the world behind, but it had come to his door anyway. Clara looked up again, eyes dark with fear. "The man who sold us? He's a federal marshal? Wade Garrett. He's got a badge." Thaddius froze. A badge? The riders weren't outlaws, they were lawmen. And now, they were almost here. And Thaddius Bell had a choice to make. Send the girls to their deaths, or fight the kind of evil that wore a badge and called itself justice? Thaddius Bell had survived wildfires, flash floods, and the silence of 3 long years, but nothing chilled him like the sight of a federal badge riding toward his ranch. The wind carried the sound of hooves now louder, closer. 6 riders were coming hard. They moved like men who weren't afraid of anything, like men who knew they'd already won. And maybe they had, 'cause inside Thaddius's cabin were 6 terrified girls, hiding behind thin walls and wounded dreams. And outside, death was coming fast on horseback. Thaddius paced the room. His rifle sat heavy in his hands. He checked the windows, heart pounding. Clara sat slumped against the wall, blood still soaking through her dress. The youngest girl, still burning with fever, lay curled in a corner, mumbling in her sleep. The other girls were quiet now, too tired to cry, too scared to speak. "You're sure it was him?" Thaddius asked, turning toward Clara. "A real Marshall?" Clara nodded slowly, pain twisting her face. "Name's Wade Garrett. He showed us the badge when he came to the camp. Said he was bringing us west to start a new life. Promised jobs and shelter. But it was all a lie. He sold us to slavers the minute we crossed the border." Thaddius felt rage rise in his chest. Not hot and wild, but cold and steady. He had seen evil before. But this was something worse. This was evil wearing a uniform, smiling as it destroyed. "They won't just knock on your door and leave," Clara whispered. "They'll search everything. They'll burn this place down if they have to." Thaddius nodded once. He looked around his cabin. It had been his whole world for years. 4 walls, 1 bed, some tools, a few books, a safe place, a quiet place. But now, it was a battleground. And he was no longer hiding from the world. He was standing between it and 6 lives that had already been broken once. He moved fast, checking ammo, locking shutters, pushing furniture against the door. Then he went to the back wall and opened the trapdoor to the root cellar. "Get in," he said, voice hard. Clara looked up, confused. "We'll find us there." "Maybe," Thaddius said. "But they'll have to go through me first." One by one, the girls climbed into the cellar. Thaddius helped Clara down last. Her hands were shaking, her face pale. Before she disappeared below, she looked up at him. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. Thaddius gave a small nod. "Yes, I do." He shut the cellar door and covered it with a rug and a table. Then he stood alone in the cabin and waited. Minutes later, hooves thundered outside. Shadows moved past the windows. A heavy fist pounded the front door. "Open up." A voice barked. "Marshall Wade Garrett." Thaddius didn't move. Another knock, harder this time. "We saw fresh tracks. We know they came this way." Thaddius slowly stepped to the door. "You're trespassing," he said, loud and clear. "This is private land." "Open this door, old man," the voice growled. "We're searching the place. Now." "No, you're not," Thaddius replied. A pause. Then a single word from outside. "Burn it." Thaddius moved. Fast. He yanked open the door and raised his rifle. The first rider barely had time to shout before a shot rang out. The man dropped from his horse. Screaming chaos followed. Horses reared. Men yelled. One fired back, missed by inches. Thaddius ducked, reloaded, and fired again. 2 more men fell. 1 wounded. 1 not moving at all. But they were trained, and there were still 3 more. Thaddius knew he couldn't hold them off forever. He dove behind a barrel as bullets punched through the wooden walls. Splinters flew. Smoke began to rise. One of them had thrown a torch on the roof. The dry wood caught fast. Thaddius felt the heat above him. Then he heard a girl's voice, screaming from the cellar. No, they'd heard the fire. The girls were trapped underneath. Thaddius grabbed a bucket, dumped it on the flames, but it was no use. The fire was spreading too fast. He had 1 chance. He bolted outside, firing at the riders to keep them back. The last 2 ducked behind rocks. One aimed for his leg, hit. Thaddius fell hard, dirt flying into his mouth. Pain exploded in his thigh. But he didn't stop. He dragged himself to the water trough, grabbed a soaked blanket, and limped back into the burning house. Smoke filled his lungs. His eyes stung. He ripped open the trapdoor. "Come on," he shouted down. "Now." Clara climbed out first, coughing and gasping. The others followed, faces covered in ash. Together, they helped the youngest girl out. Flames cracked above them. The roof groaned. Thaddius pushed them toward the back door. "Run for the trees," he barked. "Stay low." The girls ran. Thaddius turned to cover them and saw Marshal Garrett step out from the smoke, gun in hand, eyes cold as ice. Smoke curled into the sky, black and thick. Flames licked the edge of the porch roof. And in the middle of it all, Thaddius Bell stood face to face with the man who had brought death to his door, Wade Garrett. He wore a badge on his chest, but his eyes were cold. His boots were dusty from chasing girls across deserts, and his gun was steady in his hand. Garrett looked at Thaddius like a man sizing up a problem, not a person. "You should have stayed quiet." "Old man," he said calmly. Thaddius didn't flinch. Blood dripped from his leg where the bullet had hit, soaking into his pants. His body screamed in pain, but his mind was clear. Behind him, the 6 girls were running toward the trees. They didn't look back. They couldn't afford to. "You sold them," Thaddius said. His voice was low, but it carried through the crackling of the fire. "Like animals." Garrett shrugged, the corner of his mouth twitching. "They were going nowhere anyway. Orphans. Runaways, no one's gonna miss them." That was the moment Thaddius knew. There was no fear in this man. No guilt. No soul. Garrett raised his pistol. "You gonna shoot me, Marshal?" Thaddius asked. "Right here, with your badge shining in the firelight." Garrett smirked. "No. I'll say you resisted arrest. I'll say you were hiding fugitives. I'll say whatever I want. Nobody questions a federal badge." Thaddius's finger tightened on the trigger of his rifle, but his leg gave out. He dropped to one knee, pain flashing white behind his eyes. Garrett stepped forward. "Should have stayed alone, Bell. Should have kept your head down and your mouth shut." A shot rang out, but it wasn't Garrett who pulled the trigger. It came from the trees. Garrett spun around, surprised. Another shot fired. His hat flew off his head. Then another, this time hitting his shoulder. He fell backward, cursing. Clara was standing just beyond the smoke, holding one of Thaddius's old pistols with both hands. Her face was pale, but her aim was true. Thaddius saw his chance. With all the strength he had left, he lifted his rifle and fired once. The bullet hit Garrett in the leg. He screamed, the gun flying from his hand as he fell. The fire roared around them. The ranch was lost. The roof collapsed behind Thaddius, flames rushing out of the doorway. Clara ran to him, coughing, eyes wide. "We have to go," she shouted. "They'll come back." Thaddius nodded, struggling to stand. She wrapped his arm over her shoulder, helping him limp toward the trees. The other girls were waiting there, hiding in the shadows. They looked at Thaddius like he was a different man. Not the silent stranger on the porch, but the one who had stood between them and death. Behind them, the ranch burned to the ground. They didn't stop moving until the sky turned dark. They followed a dry stream that wound through the valley, avoiding the roads. Every sound made the girls jump. Every crow, every crack of a branch reminded them that Garrett might have more men, that someone else might come looking. That night, they found shelter in a small cave. Thaddius collapsed inside, his legs shaking and hot. Clara cleaned his wound. With trembling hands, she used old cloth, boiled water, and a sharp knife to remove the bullet. The pain nearly made Thaddius pass out, but he held on. He had come too far to fall now. "You should have left us," Clara whispered as she worked. "You didn't have to do any of this." Thaddius looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "I did," he said, "because once I didn't." Clara didn't ask more.
"For sure."
She saw in his face that the story behind those words was too painful to share. As the firelight from their small camp crackled, the girls huddled close together. The youngest leaned her head on Clara's shoulder. Another cried quietly. The fear wasn't gone, but for the first time, they weren't alone. Thaddius lay back, staring at the dark ceiling of the cave. His whole world had burned in one day. His silence, his safety, his home, all gone. But deep inside, something he thought was dead had come back to life. He didn't know what would come next. He didn't know how far Garrett's reach truly was. But he knew this. Those girls were not going back. It's not while he was breathing. And he would not let another innocent suffer because of fear. Not again. The morning came cold and quiet. A soft wind moved through the valley, but there was no birdsong. Only the heavy silence of fear and survival. Thaddius Bell opened his eyes in the cave and winced. His leg throbbed with pain, wrapped tight in old cloth, still swollen and red, but he was alive. So were the girls, and they were still running. Clara crouched near the cave entrance, watching the horizon. Her eyes were sharp now, her body tense like a wire. Looked different than when she arrived, still weak, still healing, but stronger in spirit. She had faced the worst kind of evil and survived, and now she was ready to fight. "They'll come looking," she said without turning. "Garrett won't stop. Even hurt, even bleeding. He'll come. He wants us back." Thaddius nodded. "Slowly, I know." The others sat close to the fire, eating dry bread and pieces of jerky Thaddius had packed years ago. They said little. Fear still hung in the air like smoke. But beneath that fear was something else, something new. Trust. They trusted Thaddius now. He'd lost his home, his quiet, his peace. But in return, he'd found something else: purpose. He looked at those girls and knew he wasn't running anymore. Clara turned to him. "We need a plan." Thaddius sat up, teeth clenched as pain shot through his leg. "We can't keep hiding. He'll send men, maybe more marshals. He has power and he'll use it. But we have truth," Clara said, "and we have each other." Thaddius thought for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I know someone, a man in Black Hollow, for days south of here. He used to be a judge before the corruption drove him out. He might still have contacts, people who don't wear fake badges." Clara's eyes lit up. "You think he'll help?" "If he's still alive," Thaddius said. "And if his heart hasn't turned to stone like mine almost did." They moved at night, resting during the day. Thaddius rode an old mule, and the girls walked beside him. The youngest, the blonde with fever, rode with him when she was too weak. He wrapped her in blankets and whispered stories from long ago about horses, stars, and the kind of world he once believed in. By the third night, the fear started to ease. The stars above them didn't feel so cold anymore. The girls even laughed once, quietly, like they didn't trust the sound yet. But danger still followed. On the fourth day, just as Black Hollow came into view, Clara spotted riders behind them. It's two men moving fast. "They found us," she said, her voice sharp with fear. Thaddius didn't stop. "Keep going," he said. "Get to the edge of town. Find a man named Josiah Creek. Tell him Thaddius sent you." "What about you?" Clara asked. "I'll slow them down." "No," she said firmly. "We stay together." But he had already turned the mule around. Thaddius rode toward the riders, pain screaming in his leg, but he held tight. His rifle rested across his lap. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He'd already lost everything once. He wouldn't lose these girls too. When the riders got close, they slowed. One of them raised a gun. Thaddius didn't wait. He fired. The shot hit the first rider in the shoulder. The second one ducked, turned his horse around, and fled. The injured one screamed and fell. Thaddius didn't chase. He just watched. Sometimes standing your ground was enough. By the time he reached Black Hollow, the town was already waking. He found the girls at an old stone building on the edge of town. A tall man with white hair and sad eyes stood at the door. Josiah Creek. He welcomed them without asking too many questions. He saw the bruises, the fear, and the fire in Clara's voice. When she told her story, he didn't doubt her. He listened. And he believed. Within days, messages were sent to trusted contacts. Quiet men in quiet offices. People who still carried honor in a land full of shadows. And Wade Garrett never came back. Maybe he died in the fire. Maybe he bled out alone on the sand. Or maybe he ran, finally facing a fear stronger than his badged truth. Months passed. The girls stayed in Black Hollow. Clara worked in the kitchen of a small school. The youngest went back to drawing flowers in sunshine with colored chalk. Nightmares didn't leave right away, but they faded, and Thaddius, he didn't go back to the ranch. There was no ranch to return to. But he found a small cabin near the creek. It's close enough to town to hear voices again. Sometimes he sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the road, and when he saw 6 young women walking toward him laughing, smiling, living, he smiled too, because he hadn't just saved them, they had saved him.